The Achaemenid Persian Empire lasted 220 years. The Safavid dynasty, 235 years. The Spanish Empire, about 250 years from peak to collapse. The Dutch Golden Age, 150 years. The British Empire dominated for roughly 250 years from the height of its power. And the United States, founded in 1776, will turn 250 years old in 2026. 1 year from now, this isn't coincidence. In 1976, a British military historian named Sir John Bagot Glubb published an essay after studying 11 major empires across 3,000 years of history. He found a pattern. Every empire, regardless of geography, technology, or culture, follows the same life cycle. And that life cycle averages 250 years, 10 generations, from explosive rise to inevitable collapse. The timeline has remained constant from the Assyrians to the Ottomans, from Rome to Britain, and if the pattern holds, America is next. And this is the financial historian, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Empires don't die because they're invaded. They don't collapse because they run out of resources. They rot from within, and the rot always follows the same script. Sir John Glubb wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was a decorated soldier who commanded the Arab Legion in Jordan from 1939 to 1956. He spent decades in the Middle East, watching nations rise and fall, and then spent the rest of his life studying why. His essay, The Fate of Empires and Search for Survival, identified 6 stages that every empire passes through: the age of pioneers, the age of conquest, the age of commerce, the age of affluence, the age of intellect, and finally the age of decadence. Every empire that has ever existed went through these stages, and none survived the last one. The cycle starts with the age of pioneers. A small and often despised people suddenly explodes onto the world stage. They're poor, hardy, and half-starved, but they have something the established empires have lost: energy, courage, a sense of duty. Glubb called it the outburst. The Islamic conquest beginning in 622 AD. The Mongol invasions under Genghis Khan starting in 1206. The rise of the American colonies declaring independence in 1776. These weren't gradual developments. They were eruptions. A people who had been ignored suddenly became unstoppable. Why does the outburst happen? Nobody knows for sure. Glubb suggested jealousy of empire's wealth, frustration with subjugation, a leader with vision who channels collective rage into conquest. But the cause is always obscure. What's clear is that pioneers value the right things: honor over comfort, duty over pleasure, survival over status. Boys are raised to be tough, to ride, to shoot straight, and above all, to tell the truth. With lying is seen as cowardice, the fear of facing reality. These values create warriors, and warriors build empires. The second stage is the age of conquest, military expansion. The pioneers adapt the weapons and tactics of the empires they defeat. They organize, they professionalize, and they conquer vast territories in astonishingly short periods. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in less than a decade. The Mongols swept from the Pacific to Eastern Europe in 2 generations. The early American Republic expanded from the Atlantic to the Pacific in less than a century. Conquest brings plunder. Gold flows into the treasury. Slaves are taken. Tribute is extracted. And with conquest comes the next stage, the age of commerce. When multiple regions fall under one government, trade explodes. Merchants move freely across borders. Goods from different climates can be exchanged. Roads are built. Ports expand. The economy booms. And wealth pours into the empire almost without effort. The Roman Empire at its height, the Dutch during their golden age, Britain during the 19th century, America after World War II. Commerce makes empires rich. And that's where the problems begin, because wealth leads directly to the age of affluence. And affluence, Glubb wrote, is where the rot starts. Money replaces honor as the goal of young men. Instead of seeking military glory or adventure, the best minds chase fortunes. Merchant princes emerge. Families grow obscenely wealthy, and the masses don't resent them. They admire them. They want to be them. The elite fund art, music, universities, and libraries. Culture flourishes. Everything looks golden. But beneath the surface, the values that built the empire are dying. Courage declines. Risk-taking becomes foolish. Why fight when you can profit? Why struggle when you can hire someone else to do it? The military weakens, not in technology, but in spirit. Soldiers stop being warriors and become bureaucrats with weapons. Glubb noted that pacifism becomes fashionable among the elite during this stage. Empires are declared evil. War is deemed barbaric. Intellectuals argue that all conflict can be resolved through dialogue. And while the empire turns inward, debating the morality of its own power, younger, hungrier nations sharpen their swords. The fifth stage is the age of intellect. Universities multiply. Education becomes the highest ambition. The young no longer seek adventure or wealth. They seek degrees. Academic honors replace military medals. Science advances rapidly, but Glubb warned that an excessive focus on intellect is a symptom of decline, not strength. Because intellectuals analyze, they critique, they deconstruct, but they rarely build. And the more an empire glorifies thought over action, the less capable it becomes of defending itself. And then comes the final stage, the age of decadence. This is where empires die. Well, not quickly, slowly, agonizingly, over decades or even a century. But once decadence sets in, collapse becomes inevitable. Glubb identified the markers: excessive consumption, frivolity, obsession with celebrity, decline of religion and shared values, defensiveness, pessimism, and the influx of foreigners who form separate communities and owe no loyalty to the state. Let's be specific. In the age of decadence, people become convinced that consumption equals happiness. Credit becomes cheap. The masses go into debt to mimic the lifestyles of the wealthy, but increased consumption makes them measurably less happy. Entertainment becomes central to culture. Bread and circuses. The Romans had gladiatorial games. We have reality television and social media. The heroes of decadent empires are always the same: the athlete, the singer, the actor. People who produce nothing but distraction. Sexual decadence rises, not as freedom, but as distraction. Binge drinking, public debauchery. Us in Rome, citizens drank themselves unconscious in the streets. In Britain's final imperial decades, the same pattern emerged. Today, emergency rooms overflow with alcohol poisoning cases every weekend. This isn't liberation. It's self-destruction masquerading as fun. And perhaps most controversially, Glubb noted that the increased influence of women in public life has historically correlated with national decline. Not because women are inferior, but because their rise to public prominence happens when men have abandoned the traditionally male virtues of duty, courage, and self-sacrifice. When men stop being men, women fill the void. And the traits that build empires, aggression, risk-taking, physical courage, vanish from the culture. The influx of foreigners accelerates in this stage. Not immigrants who assimilate, but groups who form parallel societies. They protect their own interests first, the nation's interests second. Glubb observed this in Rome, where entire regions were controlled by foreign-born generals with no loyalty to the Senate. In the late Ottoman Empire, where minorities carved out autonomous zones. And in Britain, where colonial populations eventually settled in the homeland and transformed it. Defensiveness becomes the dominant emotion. The empire stops celebrating its achievements and starts apologizing for them. Every conquest is reframed as oppression, every victory as exploitation. The guilt replaces pride, and the young are taught to be ashamed of their history rather than inspired by it. This is the final psychological shift before collapse. When a people no longer believes in itself, it no longer defends itself. And when it stops defending itself, it dies. Glubb's timeline held across civilizations separated by thousands of years. The Assyrian Empire, 859 to 612 BC, lasted 247 years. The Persian Achaemenid Empire, 550 to 330 BC, lasted 220 years. The Roman Republic, if you count from the end of the monarchy to the rise of Augustus, about 250 years. The Mamluk Empire in Egypt, 1250 to 1517, 267 years. The Ottoman Empire dominated from roughly 1550 to 1800, about 250 years of uncontested power before terminal decline. The Spanish Empire peaked in the 1500s and collapsed by the 1800s. The British Empire's dominance lasted roughly from 1700 to 1950. The pattern isn't perfect. Some empires lasted longer. The Roman Empire, if you count the western and eastern halves together, lasted over 1,000 years. But even Rome followed Glubb's stages. The Republic rose, conquered, prospered, intellectualized, and decayed. Then the empire repeated the cycle. Same stages, same timeline. Just reset. China has survived for millennia, but through repeated collapse and reconquest. Dynasties rise and fall within the 250-year window. The empire itself endures only because new conquerors periodically restart the cycle. Why 250 years? Glubb suggested it represents 10 generations. The pioneers who build the empire pass their values to their children. The second generation remembers the struggle. The third generation hears stories but didn't live them. By the fourth generation, the hardship is myth. By the 10th, it's forgotten. The great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of pioneers inherit wealth without the character that earned it. They've never known hunger, never faced existential threat, never had to fight for survival, so they spend their inheritance on pleasure, and the empire collapses under the weight of their weakness. But here's the uncomfortable question. Where is America in this cycle? The age of pioneers ran from the colonial period through the Revolutionary War. The age of conquest, westward expansion through the Spanish-American War. The age of commerce, the Industrial Revolution through the 1920s. The age of affluence, our post-World War II prosperity through the 1980s. The age of intellect, the tech boom, the knowledge economy, the credentialism of the last 30 years, which leaves the age of decadence. And if you look around, the markers are everywhere. Obsession with celebrity, frivolity as culture, declining birth rates, massive immigration without assimilation, men abandoning traditional roles, universities teaching students to despise their own civilization, pacifism among elites, military weakness masked by technological superiority, debt-fueled consumption, political polarization so extreme that the nation no longer shares a common identity. These aren't random problems. They're symptoms of a civilization in its final stage. Glubb's thesis isn't deterministic. He didn't say empires must collapse after 250 years. He said they tend to. And he argued that understanding the pattern gives us a chance to mitigate the decline, to prepare, to extend the lifespan. China survived by recognizing the cycle and adapting. But it survived through collapse and reconquest, not through gradual reform. The West hasn't shown any sign of recognizing the cycle at all, let alone changing course. And even if we recognize it, can it be stopped? Glubb was pessimistic. He compared the rise and fall of civilizations to the change of seasons. You can't stop winter from coming. You can only prepare for it. Empires, like organisms, have lifespans. They grow. They mature. Once they age, they die. That's not tragedy, it's nature. But the death of an empire isn't gentle. Standards of living collapse. Trade disappears. Manufacturing shuts down. Food supplies dry up. Medieval Europe after Rome fell was dirt poor compared to the empire at its height. Archaeologists can measure the decline by counting household objects. From 500 to 900 AD, European homes had almost nothing. The wealth of Rome had evaporated. Security collapses too. Under empire, roads are patrolled. Pirates are suppressed. Trade is protected. After empire, every region becomes a war zone. Bandits roam freely. Microstates fight endless wars. There's no police, no National Guard, just farmers defending themselves with whatever they can scrounge. America is 249 years old. Glubb's pattern suggests we're at the end. Not next year, but soon. Decades maybe. A generation at most. The decline will be slow, painful. Most people won't even recognize it's happening until it's too late. Because empires don't end with a bang. They end with a whimper, with bureaucrats managing collapse, with currency debasement, with foreign troops invited in to keep order, with regions quietly seceding. with the government losing the ability to enforce its will. And when it's over, historians will look back and say it was inevitable, that the signs were obvious, that the 250-year cycle held once again, because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And every empire that's ever risen has sung the same song, from pioneers to decadence, from courage to consumption, from duty to distraction, and finally from dominance to dust. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.